Hi everyone. In today's video, we are going to discuss the concept of sentiment analysis and how the same can be deployed in Oracle Analytics. As we have discussed in our earlier video of tokenization, sentiment analysis is a very powerful tool used by the businesses to gauge the mood of the customer, whether the customer is really happy with the services they have procured or they have some concerns. The same they give you in the form of feedback, and that feedback then can be leveraged for any further analytics that they want to do. Now, let's see how the same sentiment analysis can be done in Oracle Analytics. That is something given as a seeded feature in data flow. So I'm going to use the same data flow that we have covered in tokenization video, wherein we are taking the data from feedback spreadsheet and loading it into the database table TBL underscore feed. So let me delete this step and add analyze sentiment. The moment I add this, it will create another column as emotion. We will have to select the column which has a textual data and save this data set. When you do that, the data flow automatically reads the customer remarks, that is the textual data field that you have given, and it will try to calculate whether the remarks or the feedback is positive, negative, or neutral. So let's wait for the output to come. Okay, so as you can see, against every line, there is a output that is telling whether the feedback is neutral, whether it is positive, or whether it is negative. Now, the challenge with this seeded utility is at this moment, I feel it is not stable, because if you see the second line, even though customer is complaining about something, the output or the emotion is showing it as positive. That is why I feel that right now, you should not use this inbuilt feature of the data flow to do the sentiment analysis. Now, there is another way you can do a custom modeling to do the sentiment analysis in the autonomous data warehouse or autonomous database. How it can be done is, I'll show you quick steps on how you can build that model, how you can train it, and basically build the same output which tells you whether the feedback is positive, neutral, negative, depending on the categories that you want to set. So let's move on to the dataware or the SQL developer screen. Okay, as you can see here, the TBL feed is the table where I loaded the data using a data flow. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a backup table, which I can later use for my analysis. So before that, let me drop this table. Okay, the table is dropped. Commit, and let's run this create table command again. The table is created. Now I'm going to add a sequence number in this table. So as you have seen, there are only two columns in the table. One is the customer ID and the customer remarks. So I'm going to add a sequence number, and I'm renaming that column as rank or RNK. Committing the transaction and adding the data. I don't want to drop and recreate it. So basically, I'm just updating this column with the sequence number. Okay. So let's see whether the data is reflecting correctly or not. Okay, so as you can see now, a rank you can see as a sequence number here. Now I'm going to create a unique index on this column. So let me create BKP on the same table. So I'm going to create a unique index and a primary key. So let me add this primary key constraint, using the index. Okay, the table is altered now. Let me commit the transaction. Now, the next step is creating a preference. So now this is where we are actually now starting with our data or machine learning model designing for sentiment analysis. So the first thing is creating a preference, but because I have already created this preference, let me first drop it. Okay, committing the transaction. So the first, the query that I'm running right now is basically creating a preference and then setting the parameters. So these parameters are nothing but values that you are giving, which will tune the model. So now, for example, max features. So what you are telling your sentiment classifier is you train or tune my model for 1,000 features. Now, if you see my database or my dataset does not have 1,000 features or 1,000 columns to do it. You can actually keep it as 10 or 50, but I'm just going ahead with standard input parameters for now. Okay, both the commands got completed. Then creating a train data. So before this, let me drop this table. Drop table. Okay, now what is this training data? So if you have gone through my video where I covered the concept of machine learning at a high level, I have explained you that the way we do machine learning modeling is we take the initial data set, take some sample data out of it as a trained data, and then do a machine learning modeling on top of it, and then test it. So basically that's a concept of train and test. So what I'm going to do here now, let's say my data set has 1,000 rows or 1,500 rows. I'm going to take some sample data out of it in a separate table. So that separate table is this TBL feed training data. So now I'm going to create this training table. And if you see here, I'm inserting for a random 500 rows from my original table that we loaded using a data flow in OAS into TBL feed training data. Okay, I'm committing this transaction. Then let me drop this train category table as well. Okay, I'm committing this transaction. Okay, now what is this train category? So this is a table where you input some categories where and you tell your model that, okay, I have certain textual data. I want to categorize that textual data into certain categories. So for example, if you want to categorize your data into positive, neutral, negative, only into 3 categories, you give those values here. Sometimes you might want to categorize it further. Like for example, highly positive, positive, neutral, negative, highly negative. Then you input those number of entries. Now, because I know my data set is basically about the customer complaints and complaints are mostly negative. So I'm going to categorize it as negative, neutral, highly negative. So let me insert these 3 values into the table that we have created. Okay, I have not created it yet. Okay, the table is created. Let's insert the values. Values are inserted. I'm committing the transaction. I'm dropping. The next step is creating an index on this training data. So first, let me drop the index that I already created. Okay, I must have dropped it already. So let's create it again. Okay, index is created. Now the next step is training the model. So this is the small anonymous block which uses the inbuilt CTX CLS package to train the model. So it uses a lot of input parameters like what is the name of your model, what is the index, what are the columns you want to consider like review ID and category. Then what is the classifier that you have created. Now this classifier is nothing but a preference that we have created here, TBL feed classifier text. Okay. and the training data set wherein you have created the categories. So my table in that case is TBL feed train category. Now, because this model is already there, let me first drop this model. Okay. And now let's create it again. All right. Nextly, I'm going to create a MyLexer preference. So let me drop it because it is already created in the database. Okay, what error it is giving? Let's see. Preference does not exist. So probably I might have dropped it. Let's try creating it if it is created, if it is allowing us to create. Okay, I must have dropped it earlier. So that is why this command did not work, but then I recreated it. And I'm dropping the index now. So now from this point onwards, basically I'm doing all my calculation on my original data set. So if you would have seen my command that we executed earlier, they were on the training data set because we created a training data, dumped the data into it, and then created a model on top of it. Now I'm training the data. So a TBL feed SA is my original table. I'm creating an index on it. So dropping the index that was already there. Okay, it does not exist. So let me create it then. Let's see how much time this takes. It should not take more than few seconds. Okay, the index is created. Now, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a sample command, which is basically scoring the sentiment. So if you see, I'm using an inbuilt CTS doc package and sentiment aggregate function and passing some input parameter to calculate a score. So let's see what is the score I'm getting on this original data set or original table TBL feed essay. So score is basically generated by the sentiment aggregate command. Now, based on this score, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump all this data in a separate table. So basically, I'm going to take the data from TBL feed essay that we originally created. I'm going to run this score command, segregate and calculate my sentiment in a way that, okay, if the score is between this value to this value, my sentiment is negative or positive, something like that. That you will see in my next command. But basically, what I'm doing is all the output that is generated by this dummy command, I'm putting it into a separate table. So I'm creating this table TBL feed essay scorecard. And all I'm doing is I'm taking the columns from TBL feed essay. I think I will need to drop this table because this table would already exist. Okay. Drop table feed as a scorecard. Okay. Now let's recreate it again. Okay. Now I'm going to add two columns into it, score and sentiments. How I'm going to calculate score? By this command, as you can see over here. So let's alter the table. And add the next column as well, that is sentiment. Okay, it is altered. I'm committing the transaction. And now what I'm going to do is I have written a small anonymous block. What it is doing is, if you see here, this is an important thing that if the score is between minus 98 to minus 80, then it is highly negative. If it is minus 79 to 62, then it is negative, else neutral. Now, this is really subjective. What I have done is based on the scores that were generated for my data set, I have done these values. What you can do is, depending on your data set, the scores would be different. So you need to understand the score and you need to understand the feedback and then decide if these values or this categorization need to be changed. So let's run this. Okay, so this anonymous block takes a bit of time because it is trying to go through all the 1,000 records or 1,500 records, try to calculate the score, and then after the calculation, it is trying to segregate it. So I'm just going to pause this video here because this anonymous block takes a bit of time to complete. All right. So as you can see, this anonymous block took close to 7 minutes to complete. So once it is done, it would have inserted the records into TBL FA, TBL feed SA scorecard. So let's see whether the data is loaded into this table and how it looks like. Great. So now I have rank, complaint number, customer remark, score, and negative. So if you see now, against every score, there is a sentiment calculated, whether it is negative or highly negative. Let's see how many distinct sentiments I have. Distinct sentiment. Okay, so it has categorized the data into 3 categories like we have given in our categories table. So negative, neutral, highly negative. And let's see the count as well. Count of 1, group by sentiment. Okay, so most of the sentiments are negative, some are highly negative, and one is classified as neutral. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a data set in my Oracle Analytics on this table TBL feed SA scorecard. So let's go here. Let's go to OAS or Oracle Analytics. I'm creating a data set in ADW admin. The table should be visible under the admin schema. Okay, I'm going to double click on it so that the data set is created. Let me save it with the same name and let's create a workbook on top of it. Now let's go to create workbook and I'm going to select sentiment and let's see the customer remarks. Okay, let's see if let me do a tag visualization. Let's see what it shows. And I'll change the color by, let me delete this from here. So there was some issue with my browser, so I refreshed the page. I'm again clicking on the sentiment and let's see what I see in tags. Okay, and now I'm going to change the color if it tells me by sentiment. Okay, so this is how you can basically, what also you can do is you can take the count of the customer remarks and then you can classify it by the sentiment that you have seen. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically draw the same thing that you have seen on my SQL developer, wherein I have shown the count of the sentiment and the sentiment against it. But a logical way would be you create a table, view, and you go through a remarks and sentiment and find out what further analysis that can be done based on the type of sentiment that you have received. If at a particular feedback level you see that the sentiment is not calculated correctly, like I mentioned, you go back to the training data set, you tweak the training model and try to further tune it. This is how you can do a sentiment analysis using inbuilt capabilities of the autonomous database. I hope you found this short video useful on how to do a sentiment analysis in Oracle Analytics. If you have any questions around it, please drop them in the comment section. Thank you so much.